The year was 1692. A small village in colonial Massachusetts, plagued by fear, suspicion, and an ever-growing paranoia. The Salem Witch Trials began with whispers and ended with blood. 30 innocent souls would be lost to the gallows, but the question still remains: were demons involved in this terrifying chapter of history? In this video, we will uncover the truth behind the accusations, the supernatural beliefs, and the people who became victims of one of the darkest episodes in American history.
The Salem Witch Trials weren't just about the accusers and their fear of witchcraft. It was about the lives of the accused, people who, in many cases, were already marginalized by society. These were individuals who found themselves at the mercy of a system gripped by panic and superstition. Let's take a closer look at some of the first to be accused, and how their stories became intertwined with one of the most tragic chapters in American history. 1 Tituba, the slave from the Caribbean. Tituba, an enslaved woman from the Caribbean, was one of the first to be accused of witchcraft. Her background is shrouded in mystery, and much of her story is lost to history. But one thing is certain: her confession ignited the Salem Witch Trials. Tituba was likely introduced to Salem in the late 1600s as part of the household of Reverend Samuel Parris, who was one of the first to report strange happenings in his home. But Tituba's origins are far more complex. She was born in the Caribbean, a place rich with African, indigenous, and European influences. It's possible that her knowledge of folklore, traditional healing, and spiritual practices from her native land may have made her an easy target in the Puritan society of Salem. Under the pressure of torture, Tituba confessed to practicing witchcraft, and even claimed that the devil had appeared to her in the form of a man demanding that she serve him. But was her confession the result of genuine belief? Or was she simply trying to save herself? Many historians argue that Tituba's confession was coerced, driven by the intense pressure placed on her to speak the truth, as defined by her captors. Tituba's confession was likely a turning point, sparking a chain reaction of accusations. Her confession was so vivid, so full of detail, that it allowed others to confirm their own suspicions and fueled the witch hunt even further. To Sarah Good, the beggar with a temper. Sarah Good was a woman who lived on the fringes of society, a poor beggar with a troubled history. She was an easy target for the accusers. In a community where personal reputation was everything, Sarah Good had none. She was homeless, destitute, and had a reputation for being difficult. A woman of ill repute in the eyes of the Puritans, she was accused of witchcraft based on her behavior and status. Sarah's life was marked by hardship. She was married to a man who was often away, leaving her to fend for herself and her children. This isolation, coupled with her occasional outbursts, made her seem like an obvious suspect when the accusations started to fly. Sarah Good was one of the first women to be accused of witchcraft in Salem. Her testimony during the trials was a mixture of defiance and confusion. She denied the charges and pointed out the absurdity of the accusations. But this only seemed to make her appear more guilty in the eyes of her accusers. Despite her protests, Good was found guilty and executed by hanging her death. Like so many others, was a product of social prejudices and fears that had little to do with actual witchcraft. 3. Sarah Osborne, the elderly woman and social outsider. Sarah Osborne's life was marked by her own form of social isolation. An elderly widow, Sarah had already been seen as an outsider before the trials. She had been married twice and had been embroiled in legal disputes over property. Her refusal to attend church regularly made her suspicious in the eyes of the Puritans, who viewed church attendance as essential to community life. In a time when religious conformity was paramount, Sarah's refusal to conform to the strict Puritan values led many to view her as a potential threat. When the accusations of witchcraft began, she was an easy target. Unlike many others who were accused, Sarah did not have the means to defend herself. Her lack of family support, combined with her fragile health, made her particularly vulnerable to the accusations of witchcraft. She was arrested and spent several months in the dreadful conditions of the Salem jail. Eventually, she died there before she could even stand trial. Sarah Osborne's case raises questions about age, gender, and social class in 17th century Puritan society. It's likely that her status as an elderly woman with few ties to the community contributed to her accusation and subsequent death.
Among the many tragic stories of the Salem Witch Trials, Giles Corey stands out as one of the most powerful. He was a man who chose to resist, refusing to plead either guilty or not guilty, despite knowing the horrific consequences that awaited him. This was a defiant stand against the unjust system that sought to break him. The man behind the resistance. Giles Corey was an elderly farmer with a reputation as a tough, strong-willed man. He had lived in Salem for many years and was known in the community. But like many others, Corey had his share of personal struggles. He had been involved in land disputes and had faced accusations of being a troublemaker even before the trials began. Unlike many of the accused who were social outcasts, Corey was somewhat integrated into the community. However, his involvement in legal battles made him a target of those looking for an opportunity to seize his property. It's believed that his enemies, seeking to gain control of his land, played a role in his arrest. At the time of his trial, Corey was in his early 80s, a frail old man who had already lived a hard life. His resistance to pleading, despite the brutal consequences, has been interpreted as an act of defiance against the unjust trials that were sweeping Salem. The pressing, the torture, and the defiance. When Giles Corey was accused of witchcraft, he refused to enter a plea neither guilty nor not guilty. The authorities, desperate to extract a confession, resorted to a horrifying punishment known as pressing. This was a form of torture in which heavy stones were placed on the accused's chest, slowly crushing them under the weight until they either confessed or died. Corey's refusal to plead was not born out of stubbornness alone. He was fully aware that a confession would mean a guilty verdict, which could cost him his land and legacy. But by refusing to submit to the trial's unjust terms, he chose to face death rather than dishonor his name and family. When the pressure of the stones became unbearable, the sheriff is said to have asked him if he had anything to say. Corey's last words, uttered in agony, were a powerful expression of his defiance. More weight. The symbol of resistance and justice. Giles Corey's death became a symbol of resistance against the trial's absurdity. His steadfast refusal to enter a plea exposed the monstrous flaws in the system, and it sparked outrage among some of the onlookers. He had become, in his final moments, an example of someone willing to sacrifice everything to stand for what was right. Despite the torturous way he was forced to die, Corey's legacy as a man who refused to bend to unjust authority lives on his courage has been praised as a rare act of honor in the face of brutal oppression. The aftermath, the impact of his death. In the wake of Giles Corey's death, a growing sense of outrage began to spread. His case exposed the horrors of the witch trials and the dangerous abuses of power in Salem. The town would soon face consequences for its actions. Corey's sacrifice, though tragically short-lived, would be remembered as a turning point in the trials. The events surrounding Corey's death served as a wake-up call for many. It was clear that the trials were spiraling out of control and that innocent people like Giles Corey were paying the ultimate price for a system that had lost its sense of justice.
The events of the Salem Witch Trials were not only influenced by superstition and fear, but also by the behavior of two young girls, Elizabeth Parris and Abigail Williams. Elizabeth, the daughter of Reverend Samuel Parris, was among the first to display strange symptoms that led to the initial accusations of witchcraft. Abigail Williams, Elizabeth's cousin, was another key figure whose actions spurred the trials. Together, these two girls were pivotal in setting the entire witch hunt in motion. Many scholars have debated the motivations behind the girls' behavior. Some suggest that Elizabeth and Abigail may have been seeking attention, or even attempting to gain some power and influence in the highly rigid and controlled Puritan society. The girls were living in a time of immense social pressure, and it's possible that their outbursts and accusations were influenced by the desire for attention and an escape from their otherwise constrained lives. However, there's also a growing body of research that suggests ergot poisoning may have played a significant role in the girls' strange behavior. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye and can cause hallucinations, convulsions, and other symptoms similar to those attributed to possession. Scholars who support this theory suggest that the girls may have ingested bread made from rye infected with ergot, which could explain their erratic behavior and physical symptoms. The theory of ergot poisoning proposes that the girls' symptoms, such as convulsions and visions, were the result of a natural toxin rather than supernatural causes. This would mean that the entire witch hunt was fueled, at least in part, by a toxic substance that altered the girl's perception of reality. This theory raises questions about how much of the hysteria was influenced by factors beyond the control of the accusers, and how society's belief in witchcraft contributed to the tragedy. Despite the Ergot theory, many still argue that the girl's motivations were driven by personal, social, and religious factors. Whether seeking power, revenge, or simply acting out due to stress and fear, the girl's behavior remains one of the most controversial aspects of the Salem Witch Trials. Their role as catalysts for the witch hunt speaks to the power of mass hysteria and the dangerous consequences of unchecked fear.
Years after the trials, many of the accusers came forward, admitting they had fabricated their charges. It was a confession born of guilt and remorse. But for the innocent lives lost, it came too late. In the aftermath, the people of Salem had to come to terms with the destruction they had caused. But even as they sought redemption, the damage was irreversible. The scars left by the trials remain, both on the land and in the hearts of those who survived.
While the Salem Witch Trials may have ended centuries ago, their haunting legacy continues to captivate and disturb. In the present day, many visitors and residents of Salem claim to experience inexplicable paranormal events. From ghostly apparitions to strange noises, the shadows of the past seem to linger in the town's streets, buildings, and graveyards. Some report seeing the ghosts of executed victims, including those who were accused of witchcraft and suffered tragic fates. There have been numerous accounts of people experiencing chilly drafts, hearing unseen footsteps, or even encountering placers in places such as the old Burying Point Cemetery and the Salem Witch Trials Memorial. Paranormal investigators, historians, and tourists alike have documented these experiences, noting that many of the encounters are concentrated near areas with a dark history tied to the trials. These events raise intriguing questions about the lasting power of trauma and how it can manifest in the physical world. As the town of Salem seeks redemption and healing, the ghosts of the past may be seeking the same.